Darren here to give you a look at this BenQ HT2050 1080p DLP projector. It is in the $500 to $1,000 range of projectors. It's $800. In that price range, you're starting to get a pretty darn nice image quality. You could spend a lot more on projectors and get more image quality and whatnot, but right now that price range is where you get some really nice starter projectors, and this is plenty good quality for the average user that doesn't want to spend a whole lot of money. So getting right into it, let's go with the lens. The lens is now made of all glass. It's some new optical design they've made, which is kind of funny. You think about, okay, that must mean that previous projectors they've made have used some sort of plastic in their lens design, but their previous projectors are pretty darn sharp as it was. But all I can tell you is that this one looks plenty sharp, and I was able to get a really nice sharp focus with it. You also get lens shift for vertical adjustments. That's shifting the lens up and down in case you have the projector a little too high up or a little too low down. You don't get it in horizontal, but that's typically a higher end projector type of feature anyways, so I'm not surprised that it does not have horizontal. What is strange though is they don't have horizontal keystone correction. You do get vertical, but you don't get horizontal keystone correction. If you don't know what keystone correction is, basically if you don't have the projector pointed dead center on the screen, you got to point it this way or that way or up and down, you're not going to get a perfectly square or rectangular screen. It's going to start to look more trapezoidal, and lens shift and keystone correction are means to correct for that. And lens shift, it doesn't degrade the image, it's optical, it's shifting the lens physically, but the keystone correction is doing it digitally, so there is some sort of degradation going on. I don't prefer to use it, but for a lot of people that are doing the simple like tabletop stuff and they just want to get a quick, decent image going on, then the keystone correction could be very useful. So see if you might need it. And it also has a 1.3 times zoom. It's a pretty middle range zoom, maybe a touch on the shorter throw side, but if you go to Projector Central, their projection calculator is an awesome tool for seeing if a projector will be able to fit within your specific space. Moving right along, let's go into the connections. Connections right back here. It's got a lot of them. You get the typical HDMI ports. Unfortunately, you don't get any MHL. MHL is the new feature in some HDMI ports, which provides power. So if you have like a Fire TV stick, which includes a little USB port to give it power, that doesn't need power if you plug it into an MHL port. This doesn't have that, which is a little odd, but thankfully they gave us a 1.5 amp USB port to allow to power things such as that. So that's nice. You're still not left dead in the water. You also get a lot of the other niceties, typical old connections like components. You also got audio in and out. You've got the old computer 15-pin connection. You've got the RS-232 connection and a 12-volt trigger to be able to sync the turning on of your projector with a motorized projector screen, so you can be nice and slick about it. Let's talk about light leakage. Sometimes with projectors, light can leak out of places and shine light on areas you don't want, like the ceiling. This one controls it very, very nicely. Let's get out of the way the speaker. It does have a built-in speaker, but any sort of projector that's built-in speakers, I never use the speakers. Moving right along, we've got the noise. Let's go over the noise. That is one of the very incremental improvements they've made over the previous models that they have. It's a few decibels lower or better in performance. I have this mounted about 5 feet over my head, and if there's nothing going on, if the audio is quiet, then I can definitely hear it. But once something's actually on and playing, I really don't notice it at all. If I want to hear it, I can hear it. Okay, I can hear it, but I'm not paying attention to it and it does not bother me. But some people, it might be bothersome, so it's one of those things where you might just have to test it. In my case, or my opinion, the noise on this is plenty quiet enough for my tastes. The lamp life is rated at 3,500 hours in normal mode or up to 6,000 hours in one of the eco modes. I've actually been very happy with the smart eco mode, but even if you want to run the full brightness normal mode, unless you're a really heavy user, you should still average at least 3 years out of the one bulb. And considering the replacement bulb is about $300, you should still average about less than what the average person pays per year in a Netflix subscription. It's 2,200 lumens. If you have no idea what that means, suffice it to say, projectors, they're mostly suitable for dark environments, or at least environments where you can control the lighting. But 2200 lumens does give you the flexibility to have some ambient light. I use it in this room midday. It's not quite as bright as it is in here now, but there's definitely plenty of ambient light, and I still like the image very much. The black levels are still pretty decent. Black levels, speaking of which, that's kind of the main quandary of projectors. Nowadays, we've got TVs which can physically turn off their pixels and have true blacks, which is a really nice inky look, and it's very contrasty. With projectors, you almost never get that, especially not in this lower price range. The blacks are not going to be that deep inky look. So to help with that, you can get a gray screen. That helps. You can also make sure that the room is pitch dark, which in certain cases like this living room, which is not below, it's not a basement, which can help. So if you have any sort of ambient light, you're not going to expect those deep blacks. But as it is, I am satisfied with the black levels. This improves upon the previous gen projectors by upping the contrast to 15,000. The previous BenQs were at 10,000 to 1, so about a 50% improvement. Will you notice that if you did a side-by-side with the previous gen models? I think you would notice it, but it's not going to be leaps and bounds better. That's just my educated guess on it. But that being said, it doesn't look to me like this is going to be a huge leap forward from the previous gens. A nice step, yes, but if you already own one of those, I think you should get more years of use out of it. If you're looking to buy a new projector, your first projector, or like me and you had a 720p projector, or one that maybe the bulbs died and the bulbs are very expensive, then I would definitely say go for this fella, because I'm very pleased thus far with the performance on it. I should note that I've been running in just the standard vivid color profile, but you can actually dive in and change a ton of settings, including the black level IRE. So there's a lot of ways to tinker with the image profiles of this, and I've been running just standard right now, but eventually I'll start tinkering around and also look on the forums, because a lot of people like to fine tune and get the maximum performance out of them. And it's entirely possible, even though I'm completely happy with the image as is, it might be possible to squeeze even more quality out of it. Rainbows, that's an important one. We don't want to miss that. So rainbows, if you don't know what those are, DLP has a little bit of a side effect. Sometimes, depending on who you are, different people are susceptible to it more or less. If you're watching a very contrasty scene with lights and darks going on, you might see rainbows in some of those light highlights. And you'll especially notice if you dart your eyes around really quickly, which you shouldn't be doing when you're watching movies or TV anyways. But it's got a 6x color wheel that runs at 6x speed. Not going to get into the technicals of that. Just suffice it to say, that's a good number. Those are good numbers. And I like the performance in terms of its reduction or subduing of rainbow effects. So lastly, which should you buy? Should you buy this? Should you buy a competitor? Should you buy the previous gen? It all comes down to a lot of different factors, such as your needs, your setup, your preference. This versus something you might previously have. If you have a 720p projector you want to upgrade, I would say absolutely go for 1080, go for a brightness increase. My previous one was only 1600 lumens. Definitely noticed the increase in brightness, although I was using that bulb for quite a while, so I'm sure it was dimmer than it was when it was new. But this versus the competition, Optoma makes a lot of good projectors. As you know, I just said I used a previous generation model of theirs, the HT2050, and I was happy with that. And there's also 1080 models of theirs which are very good performers and in a similar price range. But it's hard to say whether or not one is better than the other. A lot of them have similar specs, and there's a lot of opinions on the user forums discussing which people like better or for better or for worse. So if you're not the type of person that's going to want to buy 2 or 3 or 4 and side by side them, for this model you can't go wrong, I think, because I know for myself, or at least, that I've watched it and I like the image quality of it. If I had something else next to it, I could make an opinion about whether I like one versus the other, but it's just one of those things where you're going to have to see which one has the features that make the most sense for what you're looking to do. Like for instance, if you found a model that had horizontal Keystone, lens shift, that could be a big deal maker if you have a particular setup and where you need to have the projector off angle. But for what I can tell you, this guy has been a good performer and I am quite pleased with it. So that is about all I can say for the BenQ HT2055. I am Darren, and I'm going to go plug this puppy back in and get back to watching some movies.
I love reviewing, and if you have a product or service you would like reviewed, get in touch and I will give it the full run-through.